Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast, your place for truckside chats and insights into the retriever game. Whether you're just getting started or you're a seasoned handler, this podcast is another resource for tips, tricks, and insights from both the amateurs and professional trainers' perspectives. Each week, we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of retriever training, sharing stories of success, overcoming challenges, and forging stronger bonds with our dogs. This is the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. I'm Chris Rud, your host, fellow retriever enthusiast, and student of the game. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. Super duper excited to be with a good friend of mine and the first amateur trainer that we're talking to on the Hunt Test Hobo Podcast. One thing I really want to make sure that I do is every 3 to 4 guests, make sure I have another amateur on to talk about just their experience and what they've learned. And so today I have my good friend, Drew Cronk. Drew and I met at a pre-grand training and lives in Michigan, and we've just ran into each other for so many different times and always stayed connected. So Drew, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So Drew, some people probably don't know who you are, so why don't you introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit about, your hunting experience and how you got into dogs.
Yeah, so I guess kind of a long story, but I started as a deer hunter, hardcore deer hunter. That's all I did. But I graduated from college and I got my first dog. It was a lab. In college, I duck hunted some, bird hunted some, but not too seriously. I was more of a deer hunter. But then when I got my dog out of college, I was single at the time and didn't want to leave her home. So I dove headfirst into the whole dog world, I guess, and having a duck dog and all that. So, one thing kind of led to another with that. And, I started training her. I never competed her.
What was her name?
Her name was Kimber, actually.
Kimber. That's a pretty name.
Yeah. It was, there's a lot more of them now. When I had her, it was more of an uncommon name, but.
Yeah, that's like when I named my daughter Emma after my grandma, and I was like, thought it was so unique and like nobody's ever done it. And then like her first day of school is like 4 other Emmas. I was like, what the heck? And then I like Googled it, and it was like the most popular name that year.
Oh, really?
I felt like, I'm like, God darn it, But hey, she stuck with it. So
there you go.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it just reminded me of that story.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So, that's the dog, having a dog was really the reason I got so into duck hunting. And it's just kind of my personality. When I take up a hobby or do something, I kind of go all in on it. So then it was, I lived for bird hunting, ditched the deer hunting. And then now I actually guide. It's not my full-time job, but I work for an outfitter. I've been doing that for 9 or 10 years. So I've really gone down the rabbit hole now.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, our story is probably pretty similar. I was that guy that every day after school when I was in high school, I would like run to my bike and I'd get on my bike and I'd ride out to my Uncle Joe's woods and I would go hunting. Like, he had like 3 tree stands in this like tiny little property, and I like burned out that woods, but I was there every single day deer hunting. And then I went to college and, I came back deer hunting, and then my grandpa took me duck hunting, and I think I went hunting one other day, deer hunting, and I haven't went deer hunting since.
Yep. I've kind of got back into it now a little bit. We bought some property a year or 2 ago now up north. So it's like my dog training place / deer hunting. So I've got a little bit more back into it, but I needed a break. But I still much prefer duck and goose.
Yeah. Well, it's different. Like I'm pretty determined not to become a pro dog trainer, because I believe once, your hobby becomes your job, it no longer becomes a hobby. And I bet you guiding is kind of that same deal.
Yes and no. I think I'm kind of in a unique situation. I have a 9-to-5 job. Fortunately, my job lets me be very flexible. So I will take days off during the week if it's like a good weather day, but I don't do it enough to like burn myself out, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a double-edged sword, you know. You get you get some groups and you're like, oh, why am I even doing this? And then, you know,
what's the worst group story you have guiding?
I'm trying to think where I want to go with this. I've had some clowns show up, man. It's not a group story, and nothing bad happened out of it, but I thought I was going to be murdered one time. I had a mixed group show up, and I had this guy like pull up in just like some little old car, which is fine, but he gets out and he's wearing a trench coat with like army pants, military pants, tucked into like these black boots, like the knee high, like black boots with laces all the way up, like a G.I. Joe type thing, you know, and pulls out like a sawed off 12 gauge. And like the guy sat in the blind and didn't say a word the whole time. And it was super awkward.
How did he even get like connected with you guys?
It's just a random guy. I don't own the outfit, so I kind of, you know, when the owner gets a booking, he distributes it between the guides.
Yeah, and you're like texting him like, what did you, am I on a kill list or something? Like, is somebody going to die here today?
Yeah, the story probably doesn't do it justice. I had a buddy with me, and we both like, you know, you get that eerie feeling, just like, I don't know how to describe it. It was just, it was weird.
This is totally another rabbit trail, but it's kind of the same thing. But one time we built and managed a website. I work for a marketing firm. I built and managed this website for a guy in New York, and I'm not going to say his name, but he was Vinny. Okay, he's this Italian guy. He's a super nice guy, but he has this appearance of like he's part of the mafia. You know, like it just has this like total appearance, right? And one day I get this phone call from him. He's like, hey, I've cleared your name. I don't think you guys did this. And I need your help to fix it. And he goes and he tells us this whole story about how somebody cloned his website. He didn't clone the database or anything, so the site didn't function. But they cloned his website, stood up a fake version of it. We're actually spending, you know, marketing dollars to advertise to it to steal people's identities. And he thought we did it because he didn't understand that, you know, you can steal the face of a website, but you can't steal like the back end of it. Yeah. And so for 2.5 weeks, this guy thought we had stolen his website and we're like using it to make money off of his idea. And like he could have like just sent somebody to kill us, and we'd have no idea what he was even talking about. But that was like a really weird conversation to have. He's like, "Well, I thought you guys like had stole the website, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do about it, and all this stuff." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Like,
yeah, that's crazy.
But no, he's still a good client.
People that you don't want to mess with.
You don't want to mess with them, yeah. So you had that guy. Cool. Yeah. Well, sorry, we should. Our listeners are probably like, okay, well, I mean, these are fun stories, but when are we going to get to the dog training? So, is there anything else about like your first dog that, you know, you wanted to share?
I mean, well, and getting back to the whole guide story, that's actually how I even learned what a hunt test was. So I guess we can get into that. Maybe, you know, that might be a good transition, but, I mean, she was a very poorly bred lab. You know, she had all sorts of genetic and health issues most of her life. I ended up, you know, she was supposed to die. We did an emergency splenectomy. They removed her spleen, blah, blah, blah. So she retired young. I think she was like 6 when I actually retired her. She just passed a few months ago. So she lived to almost 12.
Wow. But, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but you know, she was the first dog I trained. I learned a lot from it. You know, and I would say, like, now that I'm more versed in the hunt test world, she would have been like a solid seasoned dog, seasoned level dog. You know, she would run blinds. She was steady, quiet, you know, everything you need in a hunting dog, really. She was a great hunting dog. I bet she picked up close to 5,000 birds in her career. Just, she traveled the country with me. We went to Canada, Arkansas, the Dakotas, everywhere, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. So she was a good dog, but she doesn't quite compare to Favor. But, I learned a lot from her.
Yeah. What was, do you remember, like, I feel like every time you train your first dog, like I remember, there's a certain moment at the end of force fetch that I couldn't get through. Like I really struggled with. Was there any moment that you had that with Kimberly?
Honestly, not with force fetch with her.
Well, no, just anything. I was just using my example. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair. For her, it was running blinds. And honestly, training was kind of just difficult with her. She's the polar opposite of Favor. So blinds were a struggle. She did not have a good training drive. She had a terrible training attitude, hated to train. But she loved hunting and she was very good at it. So it was difficult, like already a fairly low drive dog for training and then trying to get her to run blinds. That was a little bit of a battle.
Yeah, but you got her to do it though. It sounds like if she's running a season.
Yeah, no, I mean, she didn't run stylish blinds. I'm just, comparing her to what I have now, but she would get the job done. She would kind of go half speed out there. She would handle decently, out to 100 yards or so. She wouldn't run a 300-yard blind, or if she did, it would take a long time. But yeah, so like the whole force to pile and tee and, the handling stuff, that took a while.
Yeah.
And at the time, I thought that it was really good because I didn't really know what these dogs could do. Because she was my first dog. I'd never seen a hunt test. All my buddies had, she was one of the better dogs in my group of friends. Most of them had what, I'm sure you've heard the term like rock dogs. So if you run a blind, you throw a rock out there so it splashes and then send the dog instead of like truly handling. So,
yeah.
So like, at that time, I thought it was impressive, and I thought that she was doing awesome. Not that she wasn't a good dog. I don't want it to come across like that, but I guess I just didn't know what I didn't know. But yeah, I would say that was like the biggest thing. I mean, she was always very obedient. Force fetch went fine, but
yeah,
she's had a bad training attitude, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's
hard
like
to
train new stuff.
There are certain dogs that they're just like once they've tasted a bird, they're like that's all I want. And trying to do plastic, it was just the caviar.
Exactly. And I mean, she knew the drill. Like even if I threw ducks in training, dead ducks, it was a little bit better, but it wasn't the same as that
warm-blooded live bird, man.
Yeah, and I mean, it just, looking back, I wouldn't change anything. I love her, or I loved her, and, she was a great first dog. Honestly, I think it was probably a better situation because she wasn't like a crazy fire breather. I think it's easier to get in trouble with one of those if you don't know what you're doing. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, so Favor's been pretty accomplished. Why don't you give me a little bit of a story on who Favor is? And I know you didn't get him as a puppy, so tell us a little bit about that whole story.
Yeah, that's it's kind of a long story. So like I said, I had to retire Kimber fairly young. I'm just trying to think of the timeline here. So I had to retire her fairly young, around 6 or so. So we actually were going to get another puppy. I was actually on the list for a puppy, but it was a ways out, like the breeding had just happened. And then just life events and, Kimber, she was kind of on a downhill at that point before she bounced back. And my wife and I were talking and we're like, I just don't know if it's fair to her or the puppy, to get a puppy. I'm not going to be able to spend, either time with Kimber or time with the puppy as much. And we were both working, 10 hours a day. I was going into the office at that point. I've been working from home, which I think is a big part of the reason we were able to do what we did. But I've been working from home since COVID. So anyway, we were just on one of the Facebook dog sites. I don't remember the name of it. There's ones that sell like, started dogs and puppies and all that. And my wife actually found him. He was down in Texas. He was probably about a year and a half when we got him. So I actually bought him as a started dog. But he was out of a litter. He kind of has a unique story. He was out of a litter of 14. Wow. Him and one other brother were never picked. Like nobody ever picked them. So they actually lived for like the first year plus of their life with the breeder, kind of hanging out there. And she did some I give her credit. Like she did some training to get them started and everything. And then, I believe her husband had some very serious medical issues, so she had to sell her dogs, and she sold him and his brother, to a local pro that she had worked with in the past. And I think he had favor. I don't know the exact timeline, but like a month or two maybe. And then he put him up for sale. And then we just happened to stumble across it. And, I called the guy, talked to him a lot. You always hear the horror stories of buying a started dog, right? Or a washout, whatever people call it. But so I got a lot of videos and talked to the guy quite a bit. And we ended up flying down to Texas, and I watched him run for a day. He let me run him. And rented a car and drove him home.
What level was he at when you were there?
Well, they sold him as a started dog. I would say, just to be completely honest, I would say he would have been slightly more advanced than started. I don't think he would have been like a season level dog. He was through basic obedience. He had been force fetched, but I had to go back and redo that. It wasn't the kind of force fetch that I would want, I guess we'll say. And then he was starting like some handling drills, and maybe, I'm trying to remember, sorry, but I think he was doing like basic pattern blinds, maybe like in the yard, white stakes, 30, 40 yard pattern blind type thing in the trainer's yard type deal. So I don't know. He's old as a started dog. I would say he would be like a high level started dog.
Yeah.
I don't know that he would have passed a season test, when I got him, but yeah, he definitely had a start. So
cool. So from there, we can go one of two ways. We can keep going down the favor road, or you can tell us, a little bit about how you got into Hunt Test and why you got into Hunt Test. Because I think either way, we're going to end up with favor doing really well.
It's up to you, man. I can go either way.
Let's keep going down favor's road, because it's
okay. Good. So, and I guess I should say my goal with getting this dog was to train it to his seasoned level. I guess this kind of ties into the whole back to kind of how I mentioned the whole guiding thing. That's the way I found out what a hunt test was. One of my regular clients, he's actually the president of our HRC club now, Russ Doucette, but he was like a regular client, and he would come out and hunt with us, and we just developed a friendship over the years. And then he got a dog and somehow got into the hunt test thing, and it was like his first hunt test dog that he was training, and he was telling me about it. And so I went to like a couple of club trainings and watched some of the dogs and stuff. And so my goal when I was looking for, when I got favor, was to put a season title on him and just hunt the crap out of him, have him be my guide dog, basically. Yeah. I wasn't planning on going down this whole hunt test rabbit hole that we have now. So, so I'll give another shout out, Brad Cabina. He reached out to me. He's part of the St. Clair Flats Club. He reached out to me on Facebook, and it turns out we live 15 minutes apart. So he had a dog, a finish level dog, and he had another dog that was the same age as Favor. And so he kind of reached out once I got him, and we started training together a little bit. And, so we were training for that season test. I wanted to get the season title on him. And then, so we cruised through season, and, we were training really hard at that point, twice a day, 6-7 days a week. Looking back, it was probably a little excessive, but Favor loved it. I mean, he's the kind of dog, even now he's 6 years old, he'll go out and run T or, double T. He'll run it all day, 100% effort. Like, he just doesn't care. So I didn't have to worry about burning him out. A lot different than my first dog.
And so you're probably like, this is so much fun, I'm just going to keep doing it every day.
That's exactly what it was. Like, and I needed to tone it down a little bit. I needed to stop for his sake before he killed himself. So
yeah.
But so season, we flew through it. No issues there. And then so I was like, well, might as well try finished. So we started training for that and kind of cruised through that as well. And then, so the year he got his finish title, I think I put a master title on him the same summer. We did all of our 6 master passes in the same summer, which that was a long summer. But, and then after that, it was just kind of like, well, what do I do next?
You're like, I'm hooked, but I don't know where to go.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is my first dog, and it's like, I've heard of the Grand. When I ran my first Grand with him, at least in our club, like, it wasn't like a big thing. You know how like everybody from the club goes to a finish test or a weekend test. Well, really, I think there was only a couple people in our club that had ever even been to the Grand. So I never really put that much thought into it, and then. That's kind of where Brad came in and a couple other guys in the club that have been doing this a lot longer. They're like, you should try the Grand with him. Like, the way he marks and the way he handles, I think you got a shot. So Brad kind of peer pressured me into it. He kind of wore me down on it. And, so we tried it.
Where was your first Grand?
What's that?
Where was your first Grand?
St. Louis. Yeah.
The fall Grand in St. Louis?
Fall St. Louis.
Okay. Yeah, that was my first Grand too.
Is that where we met up for the first time?
No, because we met on the way to Natchez because
at Gator Point.
Yeah, because I had been training with Dan, and Dan doesn't normally do the spring Grand, so I literally didn't know, I didn't know anybody besides Dan and his crew. Yeah. And the only people I knew that ran the Grand that I had any sort of connection with was Jeremy, because, I bought Winter from Jeremy. And so I texted him. I was like, hey, can I go? Can I train with you guys? Because I literally had nothing. And it was probably the same for you. But when I left for that Grand, there was 2 inches of snow on the ground. Oh, yeah. We had this huge snowstorm that came in before I went to Natchez. And I was like, I'll never forget that. And this is maybe just a safety thing for people to know is, maybe you even remember this. We drove straight through down to I don't know, where is Gator Point? I don't remember where Mindy's place is.
Louisiana?
I don't remember
where. Man.
I just put it in the GPS.
Shot. I was delusional by the time I got there. We drove straight through 18 hours.
Did you sleep in the tent with Brad? Was that you guys that were in? Yeah, okay. Yeah. That's right. So I was sleeping in the truck next to you guys. That's right. Because you guys didn't show up right away. Okay, I couldn't remember that.
Yeah, no, that was a terrible drive.
Yeah, so we get there and we go to do the first setup, and Winter just walking to the line is like she was so hot already, and we had this double setup. I'll never forget. And she imploded, and I was thinking this whole time, I'm like, I just drove all the way there for one dog, and this dog, even though she had already passed once, I was like, this was the worst decision I've ever done in my entire life, was go to this Grand, because it was like she had never marked before. She was just so hot, and like we had to like lay her down and do it. Like Jeremy was like putting the alcohol in her pads and stuff, and I'm like feeling like it was like one of the lowest points of my life. I'm with all these new people, and my dog who like looks like I don't know what I'm doing, and I just it was a very humbling experience. Oh yeah. But the best part about that trip was when Zach fell asleep. Remember when he fell asleep at like the third day of pre-grand training, and we like put the sausages on his face.
Oh,
and we colored on his face.
Yeah.
Steve Eric thought that was pretty funny.
Oh yeah. No, that was good times.
Yeah. Anyway, so okay.
I was a little more familiar with the group. I did, similar to you though, the fall before. I literally knew nobody going to pre-grand train, and I went, Jeremy and Steve, they were gracious enough to let me jump in with them. But Brad actually just called Jeremy for me because he had known him from years back. And he just said, hey, I got this buddy. He's never run a Grand before. Would you mind if he jumped in with you? So here I am. I drove down, to St. Louis or wherever we stopped on the way to train. I think we went to Doc's place that year. Maybe. I don't know. It kind of all blends together. I could be wrong on that, but so I just showed up there, and actually that's when I met Zach for the first time, and Zach's become a really good friend over the years. So
yeah, Zach's a great guy. He's definitely going to be on the podcast here.
You need to get him on
in a couple episodes.
Perfect. But
okay, so you were talking about you went to your first Grand, and you didn't know anybody, and how'd that go, and what was that experience like?
Well, I was terrified. I don't know if I actually did or not, but I felt like I was going to puke basically the entire week. It was the most nervous I've ever been in my life, probably. And at the end of the day, it's just for a silly dog competition. But like,
isn't it crazy? I'm the same way. Anything else I run, SRSs, quals, I don't get nervous.
Yeah,
but I don't know what, because the margin of error I think is just
it's so small. It's
so slim. You're just like, I hope a seagull doesn't fly by.
Yeah, exactly.
You're like, ah!
Exactly. But I was like physically like making myself sick. Like I wouldn't even eat in the mornings until I ran, basically. Yeah. But so that was a little bit of a talk about a start to your first Grand. So again, I've never been to one, never seen one. So the first day comes and goes. I don't run the first day. I was like near the end of the pack. So of course
I was the same way. I didn't run the first day. I sat there the whole time and waited.
Yep. That's what I did. And this test was just eating dogs up. They had a mark that I think was like 180. Down a little ravine, back up a hill. The mark never, in a checkerboard field, the mark never crested the tree line. It was just eating dog. I would say probably 75-80% of the people ran it as a blind. Just lined them up, sent them on back, and hoped they winded it type deal.
Now that I'm remembering, because Clark was in your flight, right? I followed you guys.
Yes, it was.
Yes, we were one flight behind you.
Yeah, so you ran that one then, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm. That was that dog. That was the first time I was exposed to a bird that you couldn't see.
Yes.
Now, thank the Lord, Winter saw all three,
and so did Favor.
Yeah. So if she didn't see that bird, there was no way I was getting her to that thing. Not a chance. And I'll never forget. Just Dan even talks about it to this day. She ran like 3/4 of the way up it, and then just started like solemn skiing up the hill because she just got in drag back and didn't really know exactly what to do. But she's like, I think it's farther, and just like I can't even explain it. She looked like she was mogul, like hunting all the way up, and then picked up the bird, and I went, yeah! I was so pumped up. I had never been so nervous for a diversion bird in my life because I just watched dog after dog explode, and then I'm like, this dog who I ran in season 2 months earlier is like, I'm like, what if she switches on the diversion? I was so nervous. Anyway, keep going.
No, so it was, first day I sit there and I'm just watching this mark just eat dogs up. And so, of course, I'm just building it up in my head. I go home. We come back the next day. It's like early afternoon by the time I run, probably around noon, 1 o'clock. So finally I get up to the line and first bird out, second bird out, no bird. So I'm like, oh my gosh. of course this happens to me. So go back in line. Not a big deal, like, looking back, but at the time I'm just like, I'm already just shaking. I'm so nervous. And it's like, now I got this really. But anyway, so we went back. He ended up seeing all 3 marks. He saw the bomb of a go bird, fortunately. My biggest fear with that was a lot of the pros I watched, they would just, if their dog didn't see it, they would know him off the go bird and pick up the other 2.
Yeah.
And then run the go bird last if they didn't see it. I've never done that in training. So my biggest thing is like, if he doesn't see this, like, what am I going to do? I've never practiced that. I don't really want to see what he's going to do at the grand for the first time, But anyway, he got it. He picked it up clean. The rest of the week went really well. He passed his first grand on 2s the whole way. So no issue there.
Wow, that's cool. And just for the listeners, the episode after this one is going to be on with Tyler Brenner, and he's going to talk about how he teaches the no-see bird and how to handle it, because Dan and Tyler have developed a way to teach it, and it's actually pretty funny because I don't know the gentleman, but they were in our flight last year, and they ended up calling Dan and Tyler and actually spending like 5 days out at Green Acres learning how to do this. So I'm excited for this podcast. I think it'll be, if your dog's experienced. I'm gonna have to listen in because I'm curious if it's what I would do. Yeah. It's not like super complicated, but it's just a very logical progression of how you can teach an OC bird. Which, if you're going to the grand, you better be able to do it. I did it with Rex. I didn't have to do it with Winter because just if you practice selection enough, you can pretty much do it. And your dog has faith in go when I say go. But,
I'm not gonna lie. I tell myself before every grand I'm gonna practice it, and I never have, and I've still never known him off a go bird. So it's like
you still don't know.
I still don't know what he would do. I'm fortunate, I guess, he marks really well. So actually, this past grand that you were with, that was the first grand he's ever not seen a mark on. So,
which mark? The middle bird on
4
the
series,
last
middle bird.
Yep.
Yeah, that was the first time in his career he's ever not seen a mark. So
yeah, well, that's like really fortunate because I think every grand except for the first grand we ran, the one that we're talking about, Winter has not seen at least one bird. Mm-hmm. This last grand, she didn't see 2. Okay. She didn't see the go bird in the 2nd series, and she didn't see the go bird in the 4th series. Which the 4th series
struggled in the 2nd.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying a lot of dogs really struggled on that 2nd series mark as well. That's a good. I forgot about that one.
Yeah, and then the 4th series, she saw the bird that nobody else was seeing, that middle bird, and didn't see the right go bird. And that was the first time I've ever had to handle her on a mark at the grand. I was like, where are you going? Well, it wasn't where you were going, actually. Like, that bird was tough. When we ran it the last day, I think the wind was the other direction all week.
Yeah.
Because when we ran it, I'm trying to describe it to people, it was a right to left bird thrown from one tree line, and it was thrown I think most of the week it was thrown like maybe 10 feet off of that tree line, I think, based on like where they said it was. And about halfway through our day, the wind shifted completely the other way. And so now the wind was blowing the bird probably another 5 to 7 yards. And it was almost landing against the tree line by the time we ran. And she didn't see it. It was unrecovered. Like, so you basically had to run under the arc and hunt your way back to it.
Well, and there was that dead tree at the beginning of like the other tree line that it was almost deceiving. It almost looked like it fell in behind that, but it was really like 50, 60 yards past it.
Yeah. So
a lot of dogs stopped short. A lot of dogs stopped short and hunted around that down tree.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I'll never forget that mark. You probably never will forget that mark. Like, those marks are just ingrained in our heads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I'm just, what we were talking about, it's something I should train on. I've been very fortunate. I think Favor's strong suit is 100% his marking ability. So, it's allowed us to get away with a lot, I guess. But it finally got us in this last one. But
yeah, well, now you're going
to. I guess anyway to carry on. So then, so after that first Grand, we came home. I hunted him the rest of the year. He probably picked up 700-800 birds. The rest of the year, and then we went back and ran the following spring to go for his title. I was actually more nervous for the second Grand than I was the first, because it's like the first one you go into it like low expectations, like I'm just going to give it a shot and see what happens. I probably don't deserve to be here, but you never know. And so I was actually more nervous about the second Grand just because there was more on the line. You passed and get your title. So
can I do it again?
Exactly. Like, was it a fluke? I knew it wasn't a fluke. I mean, I knew he had the skill after like seeing him run the first one and like just how we trained. But yeah, my worst nightmare was getting one Grand pass and then never getting the second. After all that work, and that happens to a lot of dogs. They get one Grand pass and can never get the second pass. So that was like my biggest fear. But so then that spring was in Natchez, and we passed that one as well. And then let's see.
Does he pass 2 more after that? Does he have 4 or 3?
No, he's got 4.
He's got 4. That's why I thought he had 4.
Yeah, yep. He has. We ran Nashville, and that was the first test he had ever failed. I was crushed. We ran the Nashville Grand. We ran the banded water blind. I'm sure you heard about that one. I mean, it was just a really hard blind. It was a water blind like I've never seen before, and it put us out. We were on 2s going into it. It put us out. So I was pretty devastated about that. And then, so he had his Grand title already. That would have been for his 3rd pass. So I was kind of like, do I really want to keep running Grands? Or, this is my season dog, remember? My dog I wanted to run, get a season title on. I'm like, but then, Brad and Kai, my other friend Kyle in the club, they had young dogs coming up. They were trying the Grands. So I was like, you know what, I'll do another one. And, so then we passed the next spring, which was at Old South. That was his 3rd pass. And then I didn't run the fall. I went out to Kansas deer hunting. Just kind of a thing I always wanted to do. So I didn't run the fall, and then we ran this spring at Old South and got our 4th pass. So now he's a 4-time Grand champion. So I feel very fortunate, very blessed to get a dog like him. So
yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? When you it's such a cool feeling to accomplish something like that.
Yeah, I never would have dreamed, man. Never would have guessed. So what? Well, I want to ask one more question about Favor. What's your goal? I mean, are you going to keep running? Are you going to try to go for double-digit passes, or what's your goal? Yeah, I'm definitely not going for double-digit passes. He just turned 6. So it's just, it's not going to happen. In terms of doing more Grands, maybe. Honestly, I'm content with 4. I don't know if it really gets me anything to say he has 5 Grand passes versus 4. I'm not taking away from the people that do it. I still have a full-time job. My wife still has a full-time job. She's so supportive. She takes, we both take vacation, but she takes vacation just to come hang out at the Grands all week. So it's like the last few years, almost all of our vacation has gone towards running the Grands. 2 weeks a year, plus, factor in more time for pre-training and all that. So if there's a closer one, I'm considering Whistle, maybe not. I'm not going to be going. I'm certainly done with fall Grands. Let's put it that way. I am to be a hunting dog. So for us up here in Michigan, our season opens September 1st. So these Grands in the middle of October are just right in the middle of our hunting season. So, Yeah, I'm definitely done with fall grands. I might run spring grands if they're closer, but
yeah. Well, if you do whistle, you got to come pre.
Oh, I will 100%. I know we talked. Yeah,
because it's so close, man.
Yeah, I'm up in the air though. It's just I kind of want to have, not that I don't have fun doing the grands. I love them. Like after the fact, I'm still nervous during them, but it's just the way I am. But yeah, I'm undecided.
Yeah, no, that's understandable.
Right now, I got to get my 1,000 points because I want to put him in the Hall of Fame. I think he deserves it. It's almost like, I know he doesn't care one way or the other, but like, I feel like he deserves it, like for him, if that makes sense. I don't really know how to say it, but
I think we all, none of us could say it, but I think we all can feel what you mean.
Yeah, like, I don't know. So I'm between 700 and 800 points, so I'm hoping by the end of next summer to put his 1,000 on him and put him in the Hall of Fame. So I think that'd be a good cap to his career. I'm still going to run, Hunt Test because I love doing it. Hanging out with friends and seeing all the people. So I don't know. We talked about it. I might try to do some qualifiers, something like that. I think that would be fun, just to mix it up. And then also we kind of want to I kind of want to travel and see new grounds, just run new hunt, just weekend tests, just like go places we haven't gone before. I've ran all of them in, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana. I've gone to Kentucky and stuff, but like, I don't know. I think it'd be cool to go like to the East Coast or go more west or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm totally in the same boat. Like that's one of my favorite parts about going to the Grand is just most of the time it's down the Mississippi for me. Mm-hmm. So I get to do that drive down the Mississippi, and there's just so much there as you're going through, just different, I'm in Northern Illinois, like Southern Illinois is like a whole other country down there. It's just, it's so much different. And then getting into Arkansas and driving through Memphis, like I just love that. And I'll never forget my favorite part of Natchez, honestly, was I can't even I don't even know what it was. I drove up on this big hill in the middle of in Natchez and got to look out on the Mississippi, and I was like, this thing is huge. It was eye opening for people who live down the South. They're probably, it's the Mississippi, it's huge. But for us up north, when I drive into Ohio, I'm like, yeah, this is a pretty big river. But when you get down there, it's like, this thing is huge.
Yeah, it's hard to even comprehend, really.
It's incredible. So I thoroughly enjoy that. I went and did some training down with Clark and Lyle in Texas, and that was a whole experience, with the rattlesnakes and and all that. That's one thing I don't want to do, but I think it'd be fun to do an East Coast trip, to go. I'd love to maybe one summer spend try to make it a 3-week long trip where I start drive to straight through to Florida, run a test in Florida, run a test in the Carolinas, and then try to run one up in I don't know, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York.
Yeah,
I think that'd be really cool.
Talk to Jeff about that.
Hey, where's Jeff live? He lives up in the East Coast, right? Northeast coast?
Yeah. He's in, oh gosh, I'm going to butcher it. I mix up all those East Coasts. Is it New Hampshire maybe? Or, oh boy. I don't know. I get them all. Yeah, it's somewhere on the Northeast coast.
Yeah.
But he was telling me they have if you time it right, you can come run their club tests, and then I think it'd be cool to shoot up to Maine. I guess there's a couple clubs up there that have tests. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. So the camaraderie is a really cool part of specifically the HRC side. I've ran a few I've thrown a lot of birds for master tests, and I've ran one. I've ran a ton of AKC stuff, the lower stakes field trials, and thrown a ton of birds for opens. Mm-hmm. I just feel there's something different about HRC. I don't know what it is, but it's just a cool family environment.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everybody there is like-minded. You have something in common with almost everybody there, not just the dogs, but the vast majority of the people there hunt, or at least like to do outdoor type things. So No, I agree 100%. It's,
and it could just be that's where my friends are in HRC. And maybe people would say the exact opposite. If they're growing up in AKC, they're like, well, I know everybody in AKC. That's where my family is. So yeah. I'm not dissing anything in AKC. I'm just saying, like, I grew up, swinging a gun, and that's just the way it's been.
Yeah. And I did the master thing. I actually enjoyed, oh boy, I don't know who the audience is here, but I could ruffle some feathers. Like, I almost enjoy, like, the tests themselves of masters a little bit more. Now, I dislike the whole lack of a gun thing and lack of shooting and all that, and I don't think you need the boom cannon. But, like, they give the judges more freedom, I guess, is what I'm going to say. So you'll see a lot more, like, different scenarios or unique setups or scenarios in master. Because basically nothing's off limits. Like, the judges, it's kind of at the judge's discretion. So in that aspect, I think it's cool. I think they can be more, it just depends. I think, you can always get a master test that's more challenging or a finish test that's more challenging. That's always the question that people ask, which one's harder or whatever. But, it obviously just depends. I like the fact that they give them a lot more freedom and you can see some unique setups in master. We'll just put it that way. With that said, I haven't run a master test since he got his title. But I appreciate the creativity that they're allowed to have there. Sometimes I think it's dumb, but sometimes I think it's cool. I'm like, yeah, that's a good setup.
It's like everything
I'm not going to see in HRC.
You got to take the good with the bad and the bad with the good.
Yeah, exactly. It's, it all just depends on the grounds and the judges and all that. But yeah, I'm not one of those guys where I only run HRC and I hate masters or vice versa. Like, I'll run them both. I like the HRC because, like you said, I have so many friends now in the HRC world. So it's good to be able to go hang out for a weekend and catch up with them and run dogs. So
yeah. I'm to the point now where I almost enjoy that more than I got to go run my dog now. It's having a good conversation.
It's a good way.
Did you see the pictures of this? Did you see the pictures of this guy's hunt? It's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So why did you originally? I mean, you said you kind of were informed by Brad that, or maybe. Actually it was that guy that you had guided a few times, but
Ross, yeah.
What was it that, like, maybe your first hunt test, you're like, wow, this is not what I expected, or this was exactly what I expected? What was your first experience like?
Honestly, it was exactly what I expected. I give a lot of credit, though, to our club. We have a very involved HRC club with St. Clair Flats, and like I said, I can't thank Brad enough because he had already been through it. He had an older dog. So he had already been through it, and he was really able to guide me and make sure we were prepared. But, like, we would set up, like, mock hunt tests, regularly, and then that combined with the club training. So obviously I was nervous for that one too. But it wasn't... we had rehearsed it enough, I guess, where
you felt prepared.
It didn't catch me off guard. Like, if it wasn't for Brad, I would have been lost. But he literally walked me through step by step and basically beat it into my head. Like, this is what you do and this is how you do it type thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Last night I got on my daughter's turning 10 and she's, like, super interested in, like, the whole dog training thing. Yeah, my oldest is 10. Yeah, she's gonna. Yeah, in August she turns 10. Okay. And so I bought her a little 410, a Mossberg 410, and she's like shooting clays, like static clays. Like, I don't think she's ready to swing or anything, but we're gonna try to land a goose and have her walk up on it this year. Awesome. My dad asked her, "What's your goals in life?" And she says, "I want to save enough money for a parakeet." That's number one. Number two is I want to do a back handspring, and number three is I want to shoot a goose in the face. So I'm like, she's the girl that showed up to youth group or this youth retreat for church, There's this picture of, these girls who are like, elementary school girls. She's got a camo coat on, a camo hat on, and jeans and camo Crocs amongst all these pink, decked out girls. And she just looks so funny, man. Not funny. Like, she just looks like she's like a homeschool kid that lives with the guy that trains dogs and hunts all year.
Hey, raising them right.
So sorry, but my point to that was we sat and watched, she wants to run a dog and started. So, she's going to run Rex, which is hilarious because he can't hear. But like her biggest concern was like, well, if he can't hear me, how do I help him find the birds? I was like, it's going to be started. He'll find the birds. I promise you, but we were watching the video and it reminded me of my first started test. And I've been training with other people, but I'd only seen like finish. So I didn't know what started was. I just was like, I'm going to go, and I signed up for one day and I was going to go, and I'll never forget. They don't do a running order in HRC. Yeah. So we do our test briefing, and there was like 40 or 50 dogs. Like, it was a pretty big started flight. Started? Yeah, it was huge, dude. Jeez. And so we're like all standing around, and then they're like, the marshal's in the back, get your name on the board. And I didn't realize what that meant. And all these people started running to the board, like sprinting to the board, like 30 like grown men and women just start running over there. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And like, so if you're running started, like if you're marshaling started, try to have a little bit more organized than that. Because, when you get to the upper levels, like we all understand like how you got to work dogs in, and we all understand that. But man, it started, I was like, whoa, that was my biggest shock to my first hunt test was. That's
wild. I didn't, I didn't have anything crazy like that. I started. I kind of skipped that, went to season, but we were obviously in a little, Faber's a little bit older at that point. And he was a COVID dog, right? So that's, I attribute a lot of that to our success just because, first of all, he didn't run his first hunt test till he was 2.
Which that's the way you should do it.
I think it gave him a lot of time to mature, and it gave us a lot of time to make sure we had everything nailed down, obedience. And I'm huge on the whole, we can get into that later if you want, but I'm huge on the whole like line manners, obedience, like, sit there quietly and don't move a muscle type thing. But by having him be a little bit older and more mature, like we were able to take our time and get through that because there was no hunt test. It was during COVID, right? So, and I was working from home, so we trained every morning before work. I'd log on, work for the day, and then we'd train after work. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is something that for new amateurs that are getting into the game, what's the most important thing that you would focus on?
So I guess, are you talking about like for a hunt test, or?
You can take it whatever way you want. I was trying to set you back up for more steadiness because I figured that's what you're going to say, but if not, then say whatever you were going to say.
Well, no, it's so. Let me think about this for a sec. Yeah, for somebody getting right into it, or a mistake that I see a lot of, new people make is I would say don't rush. Like I see, and you're kind of like, I'd say you're more of an exception with winter because you guys got through everything really quickly. But I feel like, especially in the last few years, it's like a rush to say I got this title by this age. And that's cool. Like, I respect it. But at what cost? Now, depending on the dog and the trainer, that's obviously different. But like, you see a lot of people running 3-month-old puppies and started. And I'm like, really, like, what's the benefit to saying you put a started title on your puppy when it was 3 months old versus when it's 8 months old or a year old? Like, for me, I would just say, like, don't get caught up in that whole rush to, like, do certain things by a certain time. Like, take it at a pace that you and the dog are comfortable with and make sure everything's solid before you get into that, So that, and obviously, like Chris, you and Winter are a perfect example. Like if you have the right dog and you know what you're doing, like, yeah, you can, like, it's awesome what Winter accomplished. But
for the record, like that was never the plan. That was never, and then like she wasn't bought to be that goal. Like I bought her because I was like, I mean, I don't know if I've actually told this story on the podcast. Like I had another dog and he was a nice dog, but I knew that he had more go than I probably could handle, but he taught me a ton. Like I learned a lot about how to, I worked with him and Dan on and off up to he was running seasoned on land. He wasn't finished with swim by yet just because of the timing of our season. Mm-hmm. But I learned a lot about handling and basics there. But I knew, like, based on what Dan was telling me, I had to have another dog if I really wanted to play the game.
Yeah.
So when I realized that, I was like, okay, I want to buy the best dog possible. So what did I do? I got onto HRC Entry and looked at the last like grand reports, and I was like, okay, who's the highest? Okay, Mason. All right. Well, my friend had already bought a dog out of Mason, so I was like, well, I can't do that. So I'm going down, and it was this other dog, but the guy didn't have a Facebook account, so I couldn't find him. And then I went down, and the next dog was Scratch, with Steve Scratch. So I looked up and I saw that, and I found on a post like Jeremy was tagged on it with Piper and Scratch that was it the first litter or second litter? I think it was the second litter. And I was like, whoa, that's a 6-time grand dog, because that's what she was at the time, to an 8-time grand dog. So I just this is the best way to find dogs, in my opinion. You find a dog you like, and then you try to figure out when they're going to be bred to another dog that's really solid. Not, I don't know. That's my opinion about it. And so I messaged Jeremy and said, let me know if you ever repeat this breeding. And he said, yeah, I'm putting together a list. Do you want to be on it? And I was like, yeah. And I got Winter out of that. That's how I ended up with her. And I had no plans with her. I was actually not going to run her in that fall grand. But I had a chocolate dog. Her name was Lulu. She was a monster. She was 45 pounds of just like pure, I'm going to go get that bird. Mm-hmm. And she was ready to run the grand. Like I felt pretty good about it. I'd never been to a grand, but I was like, this dog can do it. I was like really confident. And all of a sudden she couldn't mark at all. Like out of nowhere. She got her finish title early in the spring, and she was doing really, really well. And all of a sudden she just couldn't mark anymore. I was like, what the heck is going on? And I finally just scratched her because I was like, there's no chance. And I was like, well, I paid my entry fee. I guess I'll put Winter in. Yeah. Because she'd got her finish title. It would have been in August, and the grand was in September. So she was one of those HR dogs on the paperwork. Okay. And I was just like, well, I'm going to go. And I was like, she marks better than the other two I'm training, so you never know what's going to happen. And I'll never forget, like, she made it through the first 2 series, and Dan talked to me. He's like, you have to have your expectations, right? Like, she's not going to finish this thing. Like, he told me that. And I at the time was like, yeah, I know she's not going to finish, but I want to see how far I can go. And then when she picked up remember that your third series, it had this like JP triple. There's this double where these 2 birds were kind of coming out of the same spot, and then there's this big right bird that was her last bird to pick up. And she picked up the 2 she picked up the 2 left birds, and I had to send her for the right one. And every dog was this little ditch that they had to go in. And I sent her, and she got to that ditch, and she hunted short, and they were putting the dogs on so quickly.
And I was going to say, I can't believe they didn't tell you to put her on it.
Well, she stopped, turned around once, stuck up her head, looked up, and just ran up the hill and stepped on the bird. So they didn't have time.
Okay, I was going to say, because I remember that they were if dogs like checked up at all at that ditch, they were like,
she did like one little circle and then just kept going. It wasn't even like she started hunting. Awesome. She like just spun around, was like, well, they're sitting here, and then just kept going up. And my friend Tyler was in the winger throwing birds, because we, by that point we're all out of bird tags. And I finished that blind, and all of a sudden my phone is going ding, 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 ding. He's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she did it. Oh my God. Da, 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 da. And then she had never done upland ever. And we shot, I think, 75 birds over her in the upland training that night to get her to sit.
Wow.
But my point to all that is that was never planned. It was just, she's got her finish title. She marks really well. Let's go see what happens. And then when she passed, then I was like, oh crap. Like I had never planned to go to the Spring Grand, never planned to go to Natchez. But
now you might
somebody's like, well, you know, you should see what the youngest grand dog is. And I was like, oh shoot, I got it, don't I? So then I like emailed the UKC and they told me, and she was like going to be like 10 to 15 days in front of the other dog. And I was like, and by that point I had no points either. So like, I was like, I got to come up with another 100 and something points, and it's hunting season. Like, what do I do? And that's when I met Sean, because I had to run 2 tests in the winter, or in the like November and December, which I never do, which like was a lot of work. And then I had to run one more in the spring. I had to drive down to like St. Louis and run a test before the Grand, which I never would have done. And like she almost, like she had to pass every one of those as well, and she almost didn't pass one. I was like, oh no. Like I was like, I had to, and she was a freak by the time I was done with that, getting ready to the Grand. And I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't know how I'm going to get this dog to sit, which is exactly what you should not do. All right. Correct. Don't run a bunch of tests with your young dog trying to get them ready for something. And I had to like, for like probably 2 weeks straight, I just kept setting up fake hunt tests. Like I had people sitting in judges' chairs, going through the whole.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You got me now?
Yeah. It just froze up for a second.
Okay. Sorry. So I had to go and set up every fake hunt scenario I could. I had my friends coming out, blowing duck calls. You know, we were running these dogs that like German shepherds and stuff, like to put dog scent on the ground and stuff, trying to figure out how we could get her. And I just caught her like 6 times in a row with it. And I finally solved the problem. But like, I was like, I'm going to ruin this dog's career, which I almost did. But now she's super steady, because I just like, from that point on, I just maintained it. So anyway, don't hurry was the point of that entire conversation.
Don't rush. I mean, just go at the pace of you and the dog. I guess that would be like one thing I would say to somebody who's just starting out. You know, another thing would be like, don't skip through like the basics, because it's less fun. Like you go to a club training and you see people doing like big marks, or like, you know, certain concept marks and stuff. And those are more fun to run. But then you're trying to do that with a puppy or a dog that's not ready, when you should be focusing on the basics. And by basics, I mean something I think a lot of people overlook, not just your basic obedience, but like holding blind work. How many tests do you go to and you see dogs that are just nuts in a holding blind? Like, I train that a lot in training. Well, I used to. But, and then, you know, that takes us back to what I kind of mentioned before, you know, line manners. My 2 biggest pet peeves are dogs that creep / break, and dogs that are vocal. So, you know, a lot of times that's, you know, that can be attributed to, you know, holes somewhere in the training program, I guess. You know, that probably should have been addressed when the dog was a puppy and never been allowed to do it, versus now the dog's run a handful of tests, the dog's older, its whole life it's been allowed to, well, you know, he's only creeping out 6 inches in training or whatever, but at a test that 6 inches turns into 2 feet, you know. It's magnified. So I guess those would be like a couple things. You know, keep your standards high, don't rush, because the standards only get worse when you're at a test, or if you're not going to run a hunt test, if you're even a hunting dog, you know, when you're out in the field, it's only going to get worse. So if you give an inch, they'll take a foot type thing, you know? Yep.
And what you said is really important. Like, now when I first started, and the way you started was, I want to get a season title. So you trained for the season level standard, and then you went to finish, and you trained for the finish level standard. Then you go to the grand, and then you train for the grand. I think the best advice I can give somebody is start with the start with the grand. No matter if you're ever going to get there, start with that standard in mind of line manners, obedience, marking, and blinds.
Yeah, because it'll carry over to everything in the dog's life.
Yeah. I'm going to do another podcast about this, but like, I think seasoned is a really important thing because it allows people like you to go through the game. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. But I do things a little backwards. I run started, and then I go straight to finished. And the reason I do that is because,
is weird. Okay.
And I'll get into this more in another podcast, but I think that I want to see, do I have a different dog at a hunt test? And so I run started only to see how the dog reacts in holding blinds and how they react on the line. But I still have control over the dog where I can lift them up, like hovering, for example. I run started first, and I don't get a title. I just run one weekend of it.
Yeah.
And I want to see, do they hover? Do they creep? How do they act? Do I lose? How much? Because you, like you said, you're going to lose a certain amount of dog when you go to a test or you go hunting.
Yeah.
A certain percentage. Will. Some dogs, it's 40% less efficient, and sometimes it's 20% less efficient, but there's some amount there. So I do that to kind of see where I'm at. And then I go straight to finish because I believe it's harder I want to train a dog to be able to be what I deem finished before I run seasoned. And then trying to run a dog that's ran 150 to 200 yard blinds getting ready for finished and trying to run those short 40 yard season blinds is really challenging because they don't believe it's that short.
Yeah.
And I would rather be ready to run finished and just go straight to finish just because of that. And the other thing is it's really hard with seasoned judges. They get the worst grounds. They have to set up a very challenging test. They have a very challenging test in front of them to set up the test because they typically don't have the best grounds of the test. And it's so easy to set up things that are contrary on accident in seasoned, like because of the grounds, that I'd rather make sure I'm good with all of that stuff before I run the dog, and I better have them prepared for that for finish. So that's why I just go straight to finished.
Yeah, I guess another point I was going to make, and I am a proponent running seasoned, and I skip started. Like I'll skip started with my next dog most likely, but kind of touching on, I think we have the same overall idea. So, when people ask, so many people, like they get their started title and then like the next weekend you see them running a season test, or they get their season title and the next weekend they're running a finish test, but the dog isn't necessarily ready for that. So like one thing that I found helped, and again, I attribute this, I'll give credit to Brad. He's the one that first told me this is what you need to do before I ran my first season test. But I would say be proficient at the level above before you even run, before you run the test you're going to run, if that makes sense. So if you're going to run a season test, like before I ran my first season test, we were regularly doing finished level setups and training, right? And finished level concepts. That way, when you go to season, it's going to be underwhelming. I want a hunt test to be as underwhelming for my dog as possible. I don't want to go out there with my fingers crossed, like, oh, he's never seen this before. Like, I hope he figures it out, or I hope we pass. Like, I want to go out there with the confidence and say, yeah, we've trained this. Yeah, we've done way more difficult. He's got this. And I want that test to be underwhelming to my dog, just to be completely honest. So
that's really good. That's really good for people to hear.
It's similar to what you were saying, I think. But yeah, like I would train to a level above. And when we were running, obviously it's a little different, but when I was running finished, we were doing more grand level setups, even though my intention wasn't to go to the grand by any means. But like, we weren't running just like your basic finish test. Like, I was confident that he was doing much more challenging setups, like on a consistent basis. So, because again, I want it to be underwhelming. There's already enough going on, and the dogs are excited enough. Like, I want it to be as underwhelming as possible when they go out there and see their 3 marks in a blind,
Well, that's probably hopefully that's the thing that people take away from this podcast today. That's what you just said. That's gold right there. This was the doghouse. They'd say, there's a golden nugget, everybody. We're going to have to come up with our own little like thing like that because we can't steal theirs. So they own that, but that's good
Fair
stuff.
enough.
But, well, is there anything else that, you would say to another amateur that's getting started in the game?
I think that pretty much covers. Oh, actually, I do have one more. I still do this to this day. I'll try to be quick about it.
Yeah.
I'm really big on like routines, I guess, and you probably could kind of guess that because you know me, I guess, Chris. But build a routine and follow it every single time. So again, this goes back to like, there's so much going on at a test and it's overwhelming to the dog, whatever. You want it to be as underwhelming as possible. So the more factors you can take out, the better, in my opinion. So I do a routine every single time whether it's training, by myself or with Brad or, at a hunt test. It's build a routine and do the same thing every time. So the way I take him out of his kennel in the truck, while we're at a test or at training, same process every time. Let him down, let him go out to air. Then I put my handler's jacket on, and with Favor, he's super chill. But then like, as soon as I put my handler's jacket on, he knows like, okay, it's go time, and he gets a little more excited. And then like, the process that you use, like walking to a holding blind, like me personally, I do like, before I get to my first holding blind, I do like a little heel drill, just to get them moving with me again. I do that before I go into my first holding blind. And then, the way that you have the dog sit in the holding blind, the way you come out of a holding blind, the way that you walk to the line, what do you do with, there's always that little awkward second when, you're reaching for the gun and the dog's kind of standing there or whatever. So like, what are you going to do about that? It doesn't matter what it is. I'm just saying, I think it's very helpful. Develop a routine and do the exact same thing every time. In training, at a test, and I think it just, after you do it a couple thousand times, like the dog's like, all right, I know the routine. This isn't really anything new. We've been through this so many times. Like, I know what's expected of me in the holding blind. I know how we're going to come out of the holding blind. I know how we're going to get to the line together. Like, I don't know. It's little things like that, especially at the higher levels. I think it just helps, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. The thing that I always say is that if you have those routines, then you can get corrections in the dog in training. Like, I have the dog sit in front of the bucket and look at me before I call them to me after I've loaded my gun.
That's what I do, Chris. I do the same thing.
Yeah. Really? I knew that you did something similar, but I haven't seen anybody else do that besides our crew. So that's cool.
Yeah. Well, Sean Hudiker, I think, is the one that started it. And a bunch of pretty much all the St. Clair Flats guys you see running, they all do it. Not all of them.
I love it because it's like, hey, look at me, focus on me. Like, you and I, this is like your last reminder, bro. We're doing this together.
I've slightly modified mine over the years, but it's still similar. When I walk to the line, I'll sit him in front looking at me, and then I stand next to the chair and I'll call him to heel as I load the gun. So he's sitting there.
I think you legally have to do that.
I don't think it makes a difference. I just do it because I want him to be able, he's old enough and he knows the game now. So when I'm sitting there loading the gun, he's looking out in the field for the hides or for where marks can come from.
Yeah.
So I kind of like giving him an extra couple seconds. That's the only reason I modified it. But I used to do, I'd have him sit until I loaded the gun, then I'd call him to heel. But
we used to do it that way. Now we do it the way that you're exactly talking about. We don't load the poppers until we bring them to our side.
Correct. Yep.
But you did it for a smarter reason than us. We did it because a judge told us we had to.
What?
I think you have to technically have the dog to your side before you load the gun.
I don't judge, but I went to a judging seminar just because I wanted to learn the rules. You see so many people. That's another thing, honestly. If you're going to run HRC tests, I would highly recommend attending a judging seminar. I think it's free or really cheap. If not, it's one day. Because, like, how do you know what you're going to be judged on if you don't know what the judges are judging, you know? So I actually went to a judging seminar, and I have never heard that. And I've ran a lot of tests, and I've never had a judge tell me they had to be at your side. But
we'll have a judge have to listen to the podcast and tell us if I would love.
I guess I'm not claiming it's not in there, but I never have heard of that one. So
it really doesn't matter because we both now do the same thing. And I did notice that
now you can tell people it's so that they can look out and get a view of the field and see where something.
There you go. There it is. But yeah, I actually made a mental note of when I ran this last SRS this weekend or 2 weekends ago. I was like, I need her to really get a good look at this field. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to bring her, Yeah. And I consciously did what you're saying, but anyway, it was anyway. So I'd love to, if you're a judge, let us know if that's actually a rule or not, or if it's just something that we made up on accident. But anyway, we all do it that same way, and that's cool that your group kind of developed the same thing that our group did, completely independent.
Yeah,
the dogs must be teaching us something, man.
Yeah.
The dogs are communicating.
Plus, it avoids that awkward, you see, like I said, there's always that awkward transition where, the handler and dog get to the bucket at the same time, but they don't have a routine that they do every time. So it's some dogs know to sit there, but then other dogs are, running around behind, the bucket and everything when they're loading poppers and loading the gun. It's just an awkward thing. So it's that's why I'm a fan of you develop a routine, whatever it is, for me and you, have them sit out in front. It's just it's your last little bit of control that you get before it's go time,
So what are some of the things that you train on that you're not, maybe not a lot of other amateurs that you've seen kind of do that?
Well, so I am a big proponent of drill work and concept work. Specifically with the concepts. So I start even to this day.
What's a concept for people that aren't maybe don't know? What's a concept?
So I guess how would I define it? I don't know, a certain type of marks or a picture that you would see at a hunt test or a hunting situation. So for example, a flower pot, basically. So
also known as a mom and pop or
mom and pop. Yeah. So one mark would come out and go left, left to right. The other mark would come out and go right to left, but out of a similarly placed hide or potentially even the same hide. Then you have hip pockets, which, I don't know. Do you want me to explain what these are, Chris?
No, you don't have to get into crazy amount of detail, but just because you started, you can finish that one. But you get I just wanted you to describe what you meant by a concept to people.
Yeah,
it's a marking configuration.
Yeah, a marking configuration. That's a good way to put it. So let's just say, so I have 4 big ones that I work, that I will do. And even to this day, every spring, I start off my training season with this. Maybe not immediately, we'll get back, get the dog used to doing marks and all that. But before I run any tests, at least, there's certain concepts that I want to check off because in some of these you won't even see at a test necessarily, but some of them you will. But I think that they just build good fundamentals, if you will, or good, I don't know, Chris, how would you even explain it?
I think it teaches
good responses.
It teaches discipline in your marking. That's the way that I've kind of worded it. I don't know if somebody can tell us if there's a better word, because I just made that up a couple months ago because I was like, I need something to describe what we're talking about. And
that I love discipline marking, if you will. But so I have a checklist. So I will start every spring and I will spend approximately a week. And with a younger dog, it might be more. But I will do a week's worth of flower pots or mom and pops. I'll do a week's worth of hip pockets. And I'll mix in some inlines with that, Chris. I'm not sure if you ever do inlines, but I guess if you
when you say inline, do you mean a field trial inline where they're angling across the field, or literally on top of each other?
One mark, let's say a 50-yard mark, and then a mark landing directly in line with it at 100 yards or 150 yards.
I do a drill like that for drag back, but I don't do a lot of that in concept or in a marking scenario. But I do a drill.
Personally, like with hip pockets, when I do hip pockets, I will actually sometimes have them run past the short bird to get the long bird first as the go bird. In lines, I'm not going to have them run over top of,
which some judges will.
Yeah, but pick them up in any order. And I have had, depending on the wind and stuff, I've had, tests where I've almost had inlines. But so the dog's obviously going to pick up the short one first, but they have to have that, I guess, discipline, if you will, and memory to run straight back over that fall. Because a lot of dogs, you train them, don't return to an area of fall, right? So they will. So you're training them to run through that same one and have the confidence, I guess, to get to the longer one. And then I also do a week's worth of wipeout marks, is what I call them. I don't know if there's a different term.
Yeah, that's a good name for it. That's for those that are listening that don't know. It's just a bird that you have two big birds that kind of are far away that are thrown, and then you have this one short one that lands like right in front of their face, and it's meant to wipe out the dog's memory of the two deeper marks.
Yeah, or even better, I like it shooting like straight across the field of vision for the previous two marks, and it just flings straight across like off to the side, and that's your go bird. And it wipes out the memory of the longer birds. But so I'm a big concept guy, and I will start each spring with those before I run any test. And I'll start them as singles. I do. It sounds like similar to what you do, Chris. But yeah, I'll start them in singles, short cover. I use real birds at this point, but I guess if I was training, a younger dog, I would probably do like big white flashers or bumpers.
And I'll do a little. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna go through my process a little. I don't know. Did you want to interject something? Or?
Oh, I was gonna do a selfish plug for the Hunt Test Guide in my course, because there's a lot of really valuable content in there, but I go through what my exact process is for what you're probably going to go through. And I already know, based on what we've talked about, mine's a little different. But it's accomplishing relatively the same thing. Yeah. That I just don't think enough amateurs do it. That's why I put it in the course. It's a 5-video series at the end of here's 5 marking concepts that people just don't practice and don't do. And I'm going to show you the way that I teach it first, and then move through a process, which I based on what we talked about, mine's maybe a little more in depth, but we're going towards the exact same thing. So
listen to Chris's.
If you listen to this and you're like, wow, I'm not familiar thought about this or done something like this, this might be a good course for you. Sorry, we lost you there for a second, so I just went on a little monologue.
Oh, no problem. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say, it sounds like you probably cover it in a little bit more detail even. I can give a high level of what I do.
I think it'd be great.
Probably fairly similar, but so I start as singles, short cover, obvious holding blinds, and we'll just use the hip pocket, for example, throw them as singles. I'll do that for a couple days until the dog, the shorter one is probably going to be fairly easy, but getting them to run tight to that short hide to get the longer mark, that sometimes I want them taking a true line to the bird and not either not checking short and hunting the area fall for the shorter bird. I want them to drive through it, but I also want them to take a true line and not bounce off that hide or suck into that hide, whatever they might do. And then, so I will do that as singles. And then once I'm confident that the dog is picking it up as singles, I will come back, the next day or however many days later. We may do singles for 3 days. And then once I'm confident that the dog gets that picture, I'll come back and throw it as a double. Pretty much all of the concepts I talked about, the mom and pop, hip pockets, wipeouts, I will do them. I'll start as singles, then I'll go to a double. Once we've done the double a couple of times, then I will throw it. Well, so once they're picking up the double clean. And for hip pockets, I actually will run it both ways. Have them pick up the short one as the go bird and then drive to the long one. Then I'll have them go to the long one first and then pick up the short one. I don't know if a lot of people do that, but that's just what I do.
Yeah, and I call that a reverse order double, because it's reverse of what you normally do.
Here's the other thing though, Chris. I don't know if you do this. You might talk about it. I'll do them both right to left, and then I will switch them and go left to right and do, you know what I'm saying? Just so they're used to seeing it from both ways. Anyway, so then
that's really important. You better do that.
Yeah. But once I'm confident that they're running it as a double, before I check it off, I will run it as a triple, and I'll always have my concept be the memory. So, for example, I will throw my hip pocket as birds 1 and 2, and then I'll throw a third mark somewhere else. That's the go bird, because I want them to come back and see that picture and remember it. And I'll do the same thing with a flower pot, right? You throw your mom and pop, and then I'll throw a third mark somewhere else. And then once I'm confident that they get that picture and they're picking it up clean, then I will move to another location and do the same concept. Yep. You might go, I don't know if you go back to singles, Chris, in the new location. As long as I think they're getting the concept, I'll go straight into throwing it a triple. And then if they struggle, then we go back through the process. Yeah. That's the beauty of only having one dog. Like a pro, they have to get through dogs. With me, I can go do this. I can train 2-3 times in a day, and I can run the same setup 3 times. Just not a concept mark, but just this past week, there was a tough mark I was throwing in favor. He's picking it up every time, but he wasn't taking the line and fighting this hillside the way I wanted. I read through that mark 3 times in a row. Like, that's the beauty of being an amateur, I guess. You can go at your own pace. So, but yeah, with the concept, I start as singles, I'll do it as a double, and then I leave the concept, then I'll throw it as a triple while leaving the concept that I'm going for as the memory portion. And then I kind of check that box once we move to a new location and they're picking it up clean, basically. Yeah.
It's amazing. Like we've talked training a decent amount, but we're always just like hanging out at the Grand and such.
Yeah, never in this much detail.
But man, we almost do identical things and it's very interesting because we have very different. Oh, you got me now?
Yeah, I got you now.
We basically do the exact same things, but from very different schools of Dan taught me stuff, Brad taught you a lot of stuff, but we ended up in the same place of and to me, it's because I don't remember everything that I need to do. So with Rex, I made a huge spreadsheet because I just sat down. I sat down for 3 days and just wrote out every single thing I knew he needed to know. And it's I think it was 35 different things. And I was like, this is a lot to go through. Cause I was I want to be prepared. Cause it's like what you said. I don't want him to be shocked and be overwhelmed. Everything needs to be, just be underwhelmed, dog.
Correct.
And I think that's what this checklist has helped me do. And you can, if you buy the course, you can download the marking concepts of it. I didn't put all the blind concepts in there because I felt I didn't show all that. I don't want people to go and look at it and be like, well, this isn't in the course. So I just put the marking concepts that I had in there, but they're very similar to yours. And it's interesting because, there's not a ton of amateurs that have had a bunch of success at the Grand. There's definitely, they're out there and but you talk to them and they all have the same thing of they practice marking concepts.
You have to compete at that level. You have to have a very good marking dog.
Very disciplined marking dog.
Correct.
They have to not be falling into factors and a big factor a lot of people don't realize is where those birds are placed in relationship to each other and where the hides are. Whether or not, a smart dog figures that stuff out and then gets confused if they haven't been schooled in it. One of the marking concepts that I have in my course is an inline triple, but thrown the way a field trialer does.
I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah, it's hard to describe in this, but it's basically 3 marks in a line angled out across the field, but and they're all thrown the same way. And it's really hard because dogs don't want to pick up normally the go bird's the short bird, and you pretty much have to pick up the middle bird, because if you pick up the outside bird, they drive past the middle bird. And so you try to teach it to pick up. It's probably the most disciplined marking concept that I go through that a lot of people don't do. And you practice picking up that middle bird first or second after you picked up the go bird. And it's a process because dogs want to do one or two things. They either blow past the middle bird and hunt the distance of the long bird and end up over on the long bird, and that's obviously not what you want. Or for whatever reasons, dogs want to pick out outside marks first. They want to clear the field in their mind. I don't know why dogs do that, but they all do that. So the dog wants to pick up that outside bird, and then they can't pick up the shorter check down bird in the middle.
I mix that. Yeah. In training, I don't do that drill you were talking about, but I will often try to send them for the middle bird, just because sometimes it makes more sense at a test. I just want them to be familiar, so it's not something totally new.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's beneficial depending on your wind and where if the middle bird, for example, is your shorter bird, like you don't necessarily want to run them past that at a test and worry about them sucking in and then getting lost and all that. So.
Yep. I mean, this is the debate that goes on forever is like, do you let the dog choose or do you choose the bird?
99.9% of the time I let him choose, but there's occasional circumstances where I will, steady crosswind where I think, it just depends on the setup.
Yeah. In like a weekend finish test, generally the birds are all relatively the same distance. Like there are some times where you have a big punch bird or something, but in general they're not. That's probably what I would say in the major difference between an AKC and an HRC test is. This is just my experience. Could be completely wrong. Is HRC typically has 3 relatively independent birds that are all hard to pick up, but they don't always have relationship to each other. But like at a master test, they always are impacting each other, and the blind is impacted, and so you see those concepts a lot more. And I just don't think
that's.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, when we were talking earlier and how I mentioned not that I prefer, but I like the freedom that they give them at an AKC. It's exactly because of what you just said. Like HRC, yes, there's factors and influences, but AKC is where you see more of like those concepts, I feel like.
Yep.
And I like that because maybe it's just because I train on it and it's like, oh, I want to, put our training to work here or something. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I like the mix up of it. Run both. I like both.
Yeah, that's the same for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this was a great podcast, man. I really enjoyed it. We'll definitely have to do one hopefully you come to Whistle and we'll do another one at Whistle, or I'm sure like Emma's like all gung ho about doing these hunt tests. So I think I'm going to have to we got to chase a few points with Winter too. So I might be like heading over to you guys, and because you guys are about 6 hours like to run tests where you guys are, or at least what one did I run in Ohio with you guys? Was that St. Clair's?
St. Clair's, that your test? Michigan. That wasn't did you run? There's a couple in Ohio, but I
don't remember where I went.
The one you showed up last minute to, what was that, last year or the year before?
It was last year. I don't remember what it was. That's what
was St. Clair.
It was your club. It was your guys' club. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's Michigan. That's in St. Clair.
Okay. Man, I don't remember. I just drove.
Yeah. Well, there's one that'd be a little closer if you can get in. It's my favorite test of the year. I look forward to it every year. I think it's Ohio Hunting Retriever Club or maybe Ohio River. I don't know. It's sometime in September, but it's an absolute blast. There's like 20, 30 people that camp there. It's at an old campground.
Oh, that's cool. That's totally
everybody
me, man.
Cooks out. It's my favorite test of the year. I love going to it. So.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you'll have to text me those dates, and I
will. It's not posted yet, but I'll let you know. It's a few hours from me, so it would actually be closer for you.
Yeah, that'll be good, man. I'm all about it. So, Well, Drew, thanks, man. Appreciate it. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure, man.